The exaltation of man to become a god that has countless celestial wives and children goes against the teaching of the Bible. We know that's not clear. We're talking about and reaffirming that this is not Christianity. Salvation by works goes against the teaching of the Bible. However, there are many Christian denominations that really fall under the same thing, salvation by works. They're not salvation by faith in what Jesus Christ has done. The Mormon temple sacred or secret rituals are Masonic in nature and goes against the teachings of the Bible. So the bottom line is that the Mormon gospel is not salvation by grace through faith, but it's salvation through strict obedience to the LDS Church and through its rituals. And so we cannot say that it's the same thing as the Christian church. Now I want to look at what their holy books are. They hold 4 books as being sacred. Number 1 is the Bible, and it is a King James Bible. The second one is the Book of Mormon, which is very, very hard to read. They've got books that were supposed to be written in the time of basically the Old Testament that are using phrases that the Apostle Paul used. It just doesn't make sense. We have the Doctrine and Covenants, and we have the Pearl of Great Price. These are the 4 major books of the Mormon Church. Now, the Holy Bible, even though it's King James, I want you to know that it is not the same as our King James. They have done some changes. They have gone in there and changed words for their benefit. And so you can't say it's the exact same thing. And if you're going to be talking to a Mormon, you're going to be ministering to a Mormon, use a proper King James Bible. And what I would suggest, and I said this on Sunday night, and it wasn't to try to make sales on Bibles, the expositor. Because if they ask you a question and you're not too sure on, you're going to have the expositor to help you to be able to correctly address whatever scripture.
If they use a King James Bible in the chain, is it identified as a Mormon? Is there any markings, or does it just say King James Bible?
No, I think it just says King James. I really can't answer that. I don't know. I'd have to do some research. I will say this, that I went on the website and I did some comparison on some scriptures, some key scriptures in reference to salvation, and it was the exact same wording. But I know that there are other scriptures in the deity of Christ where they have, instead of Jesus, John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. They put was a God, so that he becomes one of many gods.
Yeah.
And that's not, I mean, it's very clear in the scriptures. It's not that way. It should not have been translated that way. All right. Now, the Book of Mormon, the BOM, is supposed to be the most correct book on the earth, and yet has gone through numerous revisions since its first printing. The Tanners, forget the wife's name is Sandra Tanner, they have found over 3,913 changes, and yet the first prophet, Joseph Smith, said, "There is no error in the revelation I have taught." And so why did all these changes come about? Because there was error, obviously. Let's talk about the Mormon temple. We talked about that. They're beautiful buildings. There's no doubt they're beautiful edifices, beautiful buildings. Now, before they dedicate a Mormon temple, you were allowed to go in and have a tour. And you can come in, you can walk around. Now, once the temple has been dedicated, at that point in time, you cannot go in unless you have a temple recommend.
Well, I was just last year, my last meeting was in Boise, Idaho, and going to the meeting, they have a big Mormon temple there because Idaho is a big Mormon state. And the pastor was telling me that when that temple was built, they had the open house, just
Right.
like you said. And when it was over, they went in, tore up all the carpet, and repainted the walls and recarpeted it because it had been defiled by unbelievers.
In some temples, in some temples, you have to wear these slippers if you're going through the tour ahead of time. And for the same reason, they don't want to. But yeah, they'll do that because they unless you've gone through a temple recommend, for you to be there would be an insult, and you would defile the property. All right. I want us now to look at some videos. This is a video that we have if they have it all set up, and it will look at some disturbing images that are found on the temples. Go ahead.
Although claiming to be a Christian religion, the Mormon Church does not display any crosses on any of its properties. However, the inverted pentagram, which is known to be the highest satanic symbol, is featured extensively on Mormon temples and other church structures. For those who may find it hard to believe that Mormonism has more in common with Satanism than Christianity, One need only look at the 3rd chapter of Genesis, where it is Satan himself who promises godhood to Eve in the Garden of Eden.
So we see some of the images, and what I want you to look at right now is some of the images we see here. First of all, within a lot of their temples is the sun. We see here the moon. We see here the inverted pentagram, the 5-star point. But you'll notice that it is extended down. The point right here pointing down is extended. And that same thing here, the very bottom one on top of the wood, that's supposed to be from the Nauvoo temple, which is supposed to be their most sacred, traditional temple, if you would look like that. But that is a symbol that is used in Satanism. And it's very disturbing that this would be on a building that's supposed to represent a relationship with God. Going on from there, the moon is seen in many different phases, and the moon are the symbols of the goddess Diana, Artemis, and used in black magic. Different phases of the moon have various meanings in witchcraft, all of which are displayed around the temple. And this is from a book called Why is the Salt Lake Temple Decorated with Satanic Symbols? Also, a history of witchcraft, pages 46 to 48 and 158. And then here we see on this column here, we see again the pentagram with the elongated one pointing down, which is used in Satanism. We see the sun again being worshipped, and sun worship, it goes back, that's paganism, that goes back into the time of Nimrod. But it also, we see that with Constantine. Constantine was a sun worshiper, and that was actually brought into different aspects of Catholicism.
But, and it's very interesting that symbol is a symbol of not only Freemasonry, and the 33rd degree temple in Washington, D.C. has that as on their door, that sunburst.
Right.
Just like that, and also the Jesuits. It's a symbol for the Jesuits, that type of sunburst with the things coming off of it. So it's all that.
It is passed down, absolutely. The pentagram is all over the Salt Lake City temple. It is also found very prominent in its most evil form, with the bottom part elongated, as I just mentioned, on the Eagle Gate at Temple Square, on the Logan Temple, and the Nauvoo Temple. And so this we see very clearly.
Now, Nauvoo, that's the one in Illinois, right?
Gordon Hinckley actually rebuilt and restored it so there'd be a place that people go and see, because of the history, the Mormon history that's there. But these are symbols that anybody that's involved in witchcraft would notice right away and say, why is that there? It should not be there.
There's another one, interesting one, is the beehive.
The beehive, yes.
The beehive is a symbol, and it's also a symbol of Freemasonry. It's also a symbol in Catholicism.
And you do see that around that. In fact, the beehive, if I'm not mistaken, is actually on the state troopers' symbol.
When I remember the first time I went to Utah years ago, the road signs would have a little beehive on it, and I would say, what's that doing on here? We're out here in the desert. But then I realized that it was a symbol of Mormonism, and along with Freemasonry.
But what does that symbol represent? The beehive.
The queen bee, and the workers, and it's a working thing. Everything works, and you got to do everything by works.
In obedience.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Here we see a picture of a temple recommend. All Mormons desiring to go into, be involved in any of the ceremonies, and there are different ceremonies that they would have to go through and need to go through if they're going to become one of the celestial gods. They would have to have this temple recommend. It must be obtained. It's done through interviews with the bishop. I've actually looked at the questions. The questions are very normal questions that you would ask. Are you living properly? Are you following the rules of Mormonism? And then they look into your tithes to make sure that you are a tithing member, make sure that that's an important part. Mormonism refers to it the law of tithing. They don't refer to it as a grace. They talk about the law of tithing. So a temple recommend has to be received. And without that temple recommend, you cannot go into the temple.
Now, so they present.
If you actually have a sheet of paper that's signed, it's numbered. It's numbered on the side. It's registered so that you can go back. So you can do baptism for the dead.
This is a document you have to keep.
This is a document. Absolutely.
I see there you've got a picture of a temple that's actually here in Baton Rouge.
That's right. It's just down the street. Yeah, it's you go down Blue Bonnet to Highland, hang a right, and it's right there. And so this is the Baton Rouge Temple, and we're going to look at what goes on in the temple. And it's in the temple that they receive the sacred ordinances, teachings, including those that bind families together for eternity. Now Jim, you were an ex-Freemason.
Yeah.
And you had to go through certain levels to receive more learning.
Sure,
Am I right? You had to
search of light.
That's it. That's it. And we see the same thing happening here, that not all the teachings of the Mormon church is given to every Mormon. Right. It says right here. And this, by the way, I got this off their website. It says receive sacred ordinances, including those that bind families together. They believe that if you are sealed together, husband and wife and children are sealed in the temple, then for all of eternity you'll be sealed as a family. Because they believe that in the life to come, you'll be a family. And that's not what the scripture says, by the way. It also provides ordinance such as baptism for the dead, for those that did not have the opportunity to receive Jesus Christ. And that's from Mormon.org, which is a Mormon website. Let's look at these ordinances. You've got baptism for the dead. You've got endowment for the living, endowment for the dead, sealing of husband and wife for the living, and sealing of husband and wife for the dead. You have sealing of children to the parents, and then second anointing or the second endowment.
Now, what do you mean by the word endowment? What does that word mean?
Laying on of hands.
Endowment for living. So they lay hands, but living, that endowment for living what? Here on earth?
For a person that's alive.
Yeah.
In other words, you yourself would have to go through and receive the endowments
The
and be
bishop would lay-
sealed as a Mormon. Then you, after that, can now be sealed and endowed for somebody that's dead.
Okay, is it money involved in that? Do you have to pay to have that
No, I
done?
don't think so.
Okay, let me ask you this, baptism for the dead, because we get a lot of questions
Right.
on this program about that. So they believe that after a person is dead, what can happen?
They believe that it is possible, and this is one of the troubling doctrines of the LDS Church, is the idea of someone being baptized for somebody that had already died. And the reason they do this, they say that Jesus himself, though without sin, was baptized to fulfill all righteousness. Matter of fact, they teach that Jesus had to earn his own exaltation. He had to earn his way to become a God. Therefore, he had to be baptized into the salvation of, and matter of fact, we see a video that's going on right here about the water baptism tanks and what is going on.
Now, what is the purpose of the?
Is that where they baptize people?
That's where they baptize people. This is one of the temples. And the idea is that since Jesus had to be baptized, everybody else has to be baptized. And what they say, they said this practice has been restored with the establishment of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They quote that the Apostle Paul said this. And so we've got to look at it and determine if Paul really meant that. Is that the scriptural interpretation of this? And so I wanted to quote from the expositor, and this is 1 Corinthians 15:29. Else what shall they do which are baptized for the dead, if the dead rise not at all? Why are they then baptized for the dead? Brother Swaggart's comment. Paul is actually saying it is a fruitless point to baptize for the dead, which is unscriptural anyway, if there is no resurrection, as some are teaching. So in the time of the Apostle Paul, they were teaching this, and Paul uses as an argument to them, since they believe that, he said, look, you don't even believe in a resurrection, yet you baptize for the dead for a resurrection that is to come. Here's another quote. This is from Jameson Fawcett Brown, an excellent source, by the way, as a commentary. However, there are still some areas that I'm not too thrilled about, but you got to be very careful. He said, Alford, which is a theologian, thinks that there's an allusion to a practice at Corinth of baptizing a living person in behalf of a friend who had died unbaptized. Thus, Paul, without giving the least sanction to the practice, uses it against its practicers, some of whom, though using it, denied the resurrection. So it's not a scriptural interpretation. It's a twisting of that doctrine.